Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Feeding People podcast. I'm so happy to be with you here today. I am thrilled to talk to my guest today. I have been a longtime fan of hers and her work in the city, and I'm just so thrilled for this conversation today. I know that you will love it as well. So please welcome with me our guest today, Dr. Evelyn Figueroa, and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. How are you doing? It is dreary and cloudy here in Chicago today. We've been promised some full sun today. How do you do with the winter and the cloudiness?
I'm a lifelong Chicagoan. I'm used to several months of iciness and frigid temperatures. And
winter doesn't bother you?
Well, no, I don't love winter because it's really cold and snow turns, gray. But I think if we had even better weather, then our traffic would be worse. So I try to see it as a way of preventing the city from being overthrown.
What an optimist you are. I love this. And I need some of that right now. I'm a summer girl through and through. I've grown up here too, and I don't know why, it still
surprises you every year.
It surprises me every year, and I'm like, oh no, not this again.
Yeah. But we do seem surprised when it gets super cold every year.
Right.
We are all surprised. I do get a little outraged briefly, and then I remember and we started buying, we're big gardeners, so we've already started getting our garden ready for the spring.
Yes, I bet that does give you just the tiniest sense of hope. It's coming. It won't be like this forever. Okay, let's talk about you and your work because you are just so fabulous. So Dr. Evelyn, you're a medical trained doctor, right? A practicing doctor. You also started the Pilsen Food Pantry. We're going to talk a lot about that. And then also run and started your family's foundation, right? Am I correct? Have I missed any of your superhero initiatives? Okay, so tell me a little bit about how you got to this place, specifically, had you always wanted to be a doctor? Had you always wanted to be working in food? Tell me how you got here.
I don't think there was a lot of intention to my journey. I grew up around between Albany Park and Lincoln Square in a neighborhood that is called Ravenswood Manor, which I don't think we use anymore, in a multi-unit building raised by a single mom and a monolingual Spanish grandma who finished third grade and had to drop out of school. So I knew I was a smart kid, but that wasn't the most important thing in our home. I'm the youngest of three and learned to read when I was very young. I was 3 and just really liked learning, loved school, but didn't know what I wanted to be. And it was always something in science. I remember in 7th grade, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist. I wanted to be a marine biologist. There were lots of things. I went to CPS for high school. I went to International Science Fair. I really, really loved science. And one of my teachers said that she thought I would make a good physician when I was 17. And that was how I anchored on to medicine. It was because of Miss Bullmash that I decided to do that. I also started developing a pretty deep social conscience in my teens. I was raised Catholic, and something didn't feel right about LGBTQ and equality for women in the Catholic Church to me. So I stopped going to church after my confirmation. I went to Catholic school for grammar school and then CPS for high school. So at that point, I kind of steered away from that and just did my best to read. And there was a really great article in Time magazine where they profiled every person that had been murdered with a gun or killed with a gun in a week in America. And it was a really powerful article to read. I was either 15 or 16, and it made a huge impression on me about just what was happening in the world and things I didn't really understand. And looking at the faces and understanding the stories just really helped me want to do something to make the world better. And I didn't know how I would do it, but once I latched on to medicine, that seemed like a great direction to go in. And then International Science Fair came after that. And I got a scholarship to college, and I went nearby to Northeastern Illinois University, where no one ever goes to medical school. Lots of people from working class families, lots of mentorship. The classrooms were very small, which was very good for me. Stayed on schedule, 4 years, exactly 120 hours, working my way since high school through all of it, just to pay for the silly things that teenagers want, to buy my car, all of that kind of things. My grandma, who I mentioned before, was very, very, very supportive of my work. So even though she was not able to obtain an education, she was the most supportive person of my education. She came with me to my college orientation in spite of the fact that she didn't understand a word of what anyone was saying, and helped me buy my first car, helped me with the down payment, put me on her insurance plan, just a lot of things to help have it a lot easier than her and to really let me off the hook when I made mistakes. I learned to speak Spanish to talk to my grandma, and I learned at college. And for a long time, I thought my grandma was demented, which she wasn't. She's kooky like I am. Rest in peace. And so I got to really get to know my grandma beyond saying I love you and food. We got to have a lot of conversations, and she was just a relentless, tireless woman, but who was so kind and compassionate, way more patient than I am, but a really good human that was all about serving others. And she let me think a lot more broadly and encourage me and have me shoot for my dreams. And she was really, really happy when I got into medical school and became a physician. She was the proudest person in the world. My parents are proud too, but grandma was the proudest. And
there's nothing like that love and support from a grandmother.
Unconditional. And
unconditional.
And I think of my grandma with all the work that I do every day. She is my monolingual Spanish-speaking patient, or my monolingual needs client at the pantry. People don't understand and then start yelling at because they think that the person will hear better that way. But it's not how it works. So I actually got to live with my grandma towards the end of, I lived with her from when I was 5 to 20. And then she moved to my aunt's for a while and then moved back with me during medical school. And so I lived with her for another 5 years, and we just had a great time together. And it was so nice to be able to speak Spanish with her and just spend time and lay with her. And when you're really tired from residency, there's nothing better than coming home to grandma's chicken and just cutting. It was really great. So great memory.
It's so beautiful that she got to see you finish med school and start to see what you were doing. Yeah. And no doubt her spirit and energy lives and sustains you each day this work.
It does. Grandma's with me every day. She's the kindest person I've ever known.
That's so beautiful.
I didn't understand what social determinants were. And but I knew that people that had money and less violence did better than people that lived in areas with less money and more violence. And I knew that was real. And I didn't know what I could do about it. I loved science and I wanted to help people. So medicine was a really good fit for me. But when I got to medicine, the model that was being studied was very much a biomedical model. Even though they would say it was a biopsychosocial, it really wasn't. It was very centered around medicine. And I remember some pretty disparaging comments about patients. They came in all the time about them just being ignorant and not understanding that health literacy is a different thing. People come in because they're worried, or someone makes them come in. People don't want to come to the hospital. They have other things to do. But there was a lot of assumptions about why patients did the things they did, and not enough conversation. And I was a student that really liked getting to know my patients. And so finding a specialty in family medicine was great for me. It seemed like the behavioral medicine part was stressed a lot more than it was in other specialties. There was a lot of time spent with patients, understanding their family structure, barriers to care. That was just bedrock for our specialty, even though still our specialty has changed so much since I finished in 99. So I did my residency, and while I was in medical school, I had to choose the type of hospital I'd be at. And what I noticed when I did my several months at Cook County Hospital is that even though I loved the patients, I felt completely powerless to help them. and just really major barriers, objectifying patients by their disease, not obtaining translators. Just it was a really difficult experience. And third year of medical school in particular, when you start clinicals, was when I realized how different I was from the other kids at school. And I thought it was because I was, my family was from Puerto Rico and I was first generation. But eventually I realized it was very much a class issue, and that medicine is very, very classist. And if you do not play by the rules, you are put in the corner and alienated. You're not invited to the things that other people get to be invited to. And I always felt like I looked different. And I do, right? I have very textured hair, and I don't come from a family with grooming, and I didn't learn Spanish till I was in college. So even when I would be around the Latinos, I didn't seem authentic enough. I wasn't, I didn't speak Spanish the same. I speak with a Castilian accent. The Evelyn Figueroa, I don't say Evelyn Figueroa. I don't, there are things. So I felt very othered in lots of domains. So with the Latino students, I felt othered. With the general students, I felt othered. In spite of it, I'm a person who loves service. And even though I didn't feel like I belonged there, I still got through on cycle and graduated after 4 years and got to match in the residency program I wanted to match in. And while I was in medical school, was a teaching assistant and heard something about teachers and how few of us were minorities, and decided that I wanted to be a teacher of family medicine. Right now, nationally, it's about 0.6, so all full professors are Latinas. And I'm a full professor in our department. So I'm the first BIPOC professor in the 52-year history of our department.
Wow.
I think I got professor 4 years ago. I think it was when I got promoted to professor, and there's no one even remotely in line to a BIPOC professor. So I'm really glad to be able to get there in spite of what I teach about and what I study being different, because that's also the thing. Even though I did bench work in high school, because I did like a microbiology project, once I decided to become a physician, I really realized that I liked the connection a lot. So the research that I do that's helped me with promotion has had a lot to do with, first, it was about reproductive health, because I'm an abortion provider. I've been teaching abortion my whole career, LGBTQ work, and then it really started to pivot over to bias in healthcare. And because that's what I started realizing, that there was all this stigma about abortion care. There was all this stigma about poverty. There was all this stigma about being uninsured. There was, and you can see how I would get to food insecurity. So
absolutely.
So by understanding that there was a lot of bias and that there were a lot of barriers for our patients, I started working on exercises through abortion care that were about values clarification and just where is it coming from? Why are we thinking that this person's decisions are so foreign to us? And of course, I mentioned before we started recording that I'm very risk averse. So physicians are people that we are not very pleasure seeking people. Physicians are not the life of the party. I had a friend in college who broke up with me because she said I wasn't fun anymore. And, and I was like, well, I'm trying to, my grades really matter. I can't get drunk like that. I don't enjoy getting drunk because I can't go to work tomorrow. And that I'm a person that thinks about consequences a lot. That's just me. I worry. And, you want the physician that thinks of consequences and worries. You want that neurotic physician. You don't want that says, oh, well, they died. Okay.
Yes. I mean, I want you to have fun and pleasure also. But yes, exactly.
Pendulum can only swing so much with us. It's just, I do have fun, but my fun is the checklist. Yes. My fun is like a really great pen that writes wonderfully or good gas mileage or,
oh my goodness, that's great.
Like I'm not the funnest person and I'm okay with that. That's always how I've been. I like reading books and I enjoy nature and I love my cats and I love my family and I'm pretty satisfied with that. I don't need to, go ziplining or anything like that. That is, I have no need for speed. I not that person. And so, so the whole part about being pleasure seeking and and risk averse, when I was doing values clarification, that was a really important thing for me to understand. And our behavioral scientists taught me about that. And I said, well, why do these patients do these things, even when they know it's not going to work out? And she said, because they're pleasure seeking. They just think about that joy of that moment.
Wow.
And because you don't always have to deal with the consequences. Sometimes you get away with it. And that's what motivates them. Versus you don't want to get injured. So you avoid taking any risk and that's just people. It's a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So teaching values clarification and being with her during one of those sessions really opened my eyes about how I would teach people about it, because we like to in healthcare blame patients for their bad outcomes. And it really isn't like that.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think that if you hold the system responsible for a lot of structures that keep things the way they are, that maintain the status quo, I think that when you think about that it's so daunting to dismantle that system that people it becomes easier just to blame the individual for their choices.
Yes.
When you think about that system, it is so intimidating, because how do you speak truth to power? How do you change things and help people understand that? And it's through conversation. And in my teaching, I do a lot of the work with my learners, trying to help them see that what's happening to people experiencing poverty can happen to us. Any of this can happen to us, and that their story is our story. And that until we make things better for people who don't have the same agency that we have, we're all going to hurt more.
Yes. And so thank you for sharing that. You're right. Like, it is, of course, it is when the bias comes from the institution and the capitalist system, it is the goal to keep those things intact in order to blame the individual, right? And so I want to just transition to the food pantry because of what you're saying and how there is so much, I think, shame, judgment. If you're having a food emergency, you need a little bit of cushion, you need some help with food, that sort of thing. And I think that it does go along with what you're saying, right? There should be no shame in needing help either for a season or really for a lifetime, right? There should be no shame. And that's what I love about what y'all do at the Pilsen Food Pantry, in the way that you create such a sense of dignity and love and joy. I know that I remember reading this on your website a while ago. It's solidarity, not charity.
Absolutely.
And I love that. And I had a friend a while back say he worked at a food pantry also. And he said, his opinion was that no one should ever wait until they have $0 or negative $0 in their bank account to access a food pantry or access, emergency support that they would need. And he said, of course you should do it then, but you should also do it when you have a couple $100 or $2,000 in your bank account and you need margin and capacity in order to pay your rent, in order to pay your electric bill, etc. And if accessing emergency food gives you that extra $100, $200, whatever it is, in order to pay those things, you should. And that stuck with me so deeply in my body because that helped me connect with my own judgment in my own body for times when I needed help and support. And I feel like that has been a game changer for me in thinking about how we can all access and ask for help and access services that are set up to support us in order to give margin to not have a financial emergency or pay your other bills. So I think that is the core of what you all do at the food pantry.
Our nonprofit, we're an anti-poverty nonprofit, but we first did emergency relief after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico for the months before we opened the Pilsen Food Pantry. And our ultimate goal is actually to work in housing, affordable housing, and helping people keep their units in good shape and safe. However, housing is a very polarized issue, right? Are you homeless because you're guilty, or are you homeless because you're innocent?
Right.
Did your house burn down, or do you have a substance use disorder and so you've made bad choices and that's why you're homeless? And there's a lot of, a ridiculous amount of stigma attached to homelessness that intersects tremendously with poverty. Food was nice because it was something that everyone agrees that we should not waste. We all agree that you are what you eat, that food is medicine. We know that. And those terms, it made it so less of a partisan issue that regardless of where someone was on a party line, I could say, should good food be wasted? Should we throw away 30 to 40% of all the food that we create globally? Everyone says, no, we should not waste food. Good food should not go to waste. And you're like, great. Starting somewhere. This is great. Win-win, yes, and that's what we're doing with this. So food has been a much easier way to talk about poverty than talking about poverty, but it is very much a proxy for poverty. And and this whole part that you were talking about, that cliff, right? Like, do you need to be falling off the cliff to access an emergency food pantry? Or could you instead use the food pantry and then be able to take care of yourself a little bit better and worry a little bit less? We built the Pilsen Food Pantry with learners in mind. So we have learners of all levels that come to the Pilsen Food Pantry. We're open 5 days a week. There are high school students, grammar school, college students, medical students, resident trainees. I mean, everywhere we have social work interns, we have dietitian interns. Again and again, I have social justice interns this term. And I built it that way on purpose. I didn't want it to be a dashboard survey, which is how we used to teach community medicine. So you would drive through a neighborhood, and play I Spy. How many liquor stores do I see? Do I see a methadone clinic? Do I see people living outside? And it was very objectified. Now we have a lot of caching information so that you can get, this information without doing that. But also that's really not the experience. It's not going to transform you. Counting homeless people outside is not necessarily going to help you with your bias and check yourself, because you're not having an interaction. You're reacting a lot of the times. So we designed the Pilsen Food Pantry on purpose to allow experiential learning, so that person you were talking about, sort of checking your bias. And I do reflections with my students that are on advocacy every Wednesday. And I would ask them, what are your reactions to working in registration? And what do you think? And wearing anything like what you were wearing? And how did you feel about that?
That's amazing.
And so we have a whole discussion, because I had to do that in the beginning. I would be like, well, that person doesn't look poor. They don't look like they need to use a food pantry. And then I really ask myself, why does someone have to prove they need something?
Yes.
Like, this is food that would, if they didn't come get it, it would get thrown away. So I should be happy that they're keeping it from going into a landfill, because it's also, for environmental reasons, it's really good to get the right foods into the right tummies. And we know that when you address food insecurity, you better control hypertension, you reduce hospitalizations for heart failure, you decrease depression, you decrease diabetes, you improve diabetes control. There are all these really good things that happen. You improve concentration for kids in school. That's why they give free breakfast and lunch in CPS, because the food insecurity rates can be, depending on the economy, 75% of kids there. So, and food insecurity doesn't mean you don't have anything to eat. It means that you don't have the foods that are right for your body. I try to teach that we need to think about this a lot differently, that food insecurity, like I said before, is a problem with a solution, and that we need to do the logistics work to get those resources to people who need them in order to prevent suffering.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. I'm just like taking in all your goodness and letting it really sink into my body. So thank you for that. Speaking of beauty, I was in your new space recently, and I know the Pilsen Food Pantry moved to a new location. I was there recently, and I saw this beautiful artwork on the wall. It's a butterfly, and underneath it said, migration is beautiful. And it just, that was, I feel like I can like access the beauty of that art right now. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. So tell us a little bit about that and what migrant families have been like in your community, what you have seen. You know, we all read the news. Obviously, if we live in Chicago, we're hopefully aware of what's been happening. I live 2 blocks from a police station, and our neighborhood has completely changed in the last 2 years for the better. I could tell 100 stories about how it's better because there are new migrant families in our neighborhood. But tell us what migration has meant to your community and the food pantry in the last year or so.
That's a great question, Amy. The Pilsen Food Pantry is an immigrant supporting organization. We speak Spanish, Taishanese, Cantonese, Mandarin, and English, but really we speak other languages more than English in registration at the pantry. So we are very much used to, Pilsen is a neighborhood that has always been an immigrant community. It was Bohemians and Czechs, 100 years ago, and then switched to very Chicano in the middle of the last century. And it's still just over 50% Latino. So there's a lot of history about immigrants in Pilsen, but new arrival migrants is different. Yes. And the needs are different. So I thought we were pretty prepared. But when our alderman asked us to help at the end of August in 2022, when migrants started arriving in Chicago, I really thought we were in a good place. I had done homeless-facing work for most of my career. I had run COVID isolation units at the largest homeless shelter in the Midwest. I really felt like I could do this without much difficulty, but understanding immigration for new arrivals is a completely different language that I had to learn, and I did the work to learn, and I still keep learning. So those needs were different. First, it was mainly just young men that were in Chicago, and the families and people with disabilities are dispatched to other parts of the state, and then eventually in April of 2023. All the funding everywhere basically evaporated. There have been smaller funding cycles, but in no way, shape, or form enough to support the 34,000 people that have come to Chicago from the Texas border since. So it's been, besides grabbing supplies and doing fundraisers and drives to get supplies, to get people the resource they need, we've helped with temporary housing and, running 2 different shelters. With the aldermen, we were the hub for District 12 Police Station. Our organization helped start Mobile Migrant Health Team, which has provided 10,000 free health screenings across police stations. So lots of different ways that we've been able to interact. We already had a clothing program that we started in July of 2020 to help, again, get the resources to people who needed them. We use a lot of fast fashion. We throw a lot of things away. So the program was initially called the Clothes Closet. It's now called El Mercadito Gratis, because we also have some housewares, blankets, things like that. For people. We've had stuff put aside for folks that are experiencing homelessness, but we've definitely had to expand our offerings and understand and create some sustainability with it too. You learn to build a very lean organization, but you also know how at least I try to support volunteers to prevent burnout. So even at the police station, being innovative and understanding that they were leaving all of their sleeping bags and yoga mats when they were getting moved to an emergency shelter, and some of that stuff was being thrown away, which was not okay, because there were really nice humans that were buying these things for them. So we had to set up a laundry schedule, but that was the capacity. You couldn't use your home washers for that type of stuff. So we fundraised so that we could use a local business to wash the laundry for everyone and keep volunteers engaged. If we don't create systems that prevent burnout, and if we don't create systems that show appreciation, it gets really hard for people, and they just step away and just don't respond anymore. So I think that was something I had already learned from the first few years of burning every bridge and begging people to volunteer to pay anyone. So I learned my lesson that when that you say, tell me when you need to stop, tell me when you need to stop, or I need to give you a break. And that even if it's not what I want right then, I have to give people the time. Volunteering is volunteering. It's not your job.
Yes.
And you have to take
Yes.
care of yourself. Our volume, our volume has increased by about 40% since before August 22, maybe 50% at this point.
Wow.
Last January, for instance, our weekly volume at the pantry averaged around 450 people a week. And now it averages 600 clients a week.
Oh, wow.
But last week we were at 780 clients.
Wow.
It was, and the staff handled it. They handled it really, really well. The only thing we buy at the pantry is produce. When I started researching to do the pantry and was interviewing my patients and asking differently about food insecurity, do you have access to the food that you need for your body? Do you have access to fresh fruits and vegetables? When I did the referrals to pantries, they talked again and again about how pantries didn't have enough fresh fruits and vegetables, and they couldn't think about how they could make whole meals. It would supplement, but it couldn't replace the grocery store. And although I don't think any pantry can replace a grocery store, we've tried to come as close to it as we can. Produce is the heart of our pantry. It is the only thing we buy. We spend $1,300 a week on produce. Wow,
that's amazing.
Plus rescuing thousands of pounds of produce from grocery stores. Do, 70 grocery store rescues a month.
Wow.
A day, maybe more than that now.
I see your van out sometimes at Trader Joe's. I see you.
Yep, we're always going around and grab stuff and just trying to grab those things that otherwise children wouldn't be able to try.
Yeah.
It takes an average of 17 times to introduce a new food to a child. They will reject it and reject it and reject it and eventually like it. So if you are food insecure, you can never afford to do that.
Yes, right.
Because you can't have a second meal in case, Juan rejects meal number one, because then you're a bad parent. You're not feeding your child.
Right.
And there's nothing that feels worse than denying your child nutrition. That's happened a lot with the migrants. We are introducing foods to them at the shelters that are very different than what people eat. And it's for sustainability, sandwiches and things that you can pop back into the refrigerator, but they're not things that people are used to eating. And it's been very challenging. So they talk a lot about the food not being palatable, and you get into a lot of debate about what is hunger. And if you're hungry enough, you'll eat anything. And that goes back to the whole dignity discussion. Yes. If you're going to spend money on the food, which we're spending a lot of money to cater food inside of shelters, we should really cater food that makes people feel welcome and nourished. Because when they feel safe, they're going to be able to rest better, to emotionally regulate, to make better choices, to plan for the future. There are a lot of reasons that you should do it in a dignified way. And I think this migrant crisis has been so reactive, and that we haven't taken the time to take stock and learn from our failures and adapt to them. No one is trying to fail at this, but the amount of repetition and redundant mistakes that we've experienced with a lot of the stakeholders has been disappointing. We have the opportunity to learn, and we actually had a very similar opportunity to learn in 2020 when we had to express all the shelters. There was a lot we already understood about housing and about how inaccessible safe housing was for people that are the most marginalized.
Yes, we had a real opportunity. I mean, I always feel like we've always known the right thing to do, and we, choose not to. But we had a real opportunity in 2020 to really, really change some of our ways. And we did for a minute. And then we, came right back.
We have to really answer the fundamental question of whether housing is a human right, and that if everyone deserves housing, healthcare, education, healthy food, these clean water, clean air.
Yes.
These are really basic things I don't think that we agree on. We agree that Chicago is a sanctuary city, but what does sanctuary mean? Sanctuary, if you look it up, it's a place of respite. It's a place of healing. It's a place of rest.
Place of joy.
Yeah, I don't see that. Like, I don't, so we all have to agree to what really informs a sanctuary space, and then build that.
I love that. Like, coming to we can disagree in the practices or the work, but to have a common agreement on what sanctuary means and how each of us has a role to play within that. I love that. So crucial. You're right. Dr. Evelyn, listen, speaking of burnout, do you sleep? And how do you, and just all the things you do are just unbelievable. You were mentioning the laundry, and I was like, oh my gosh, all the things you all do. How do you avoid burnout if you do? And like, who feeds you? I'm always so interested in the people who feed others. Like, how are they fed?
I have a very nice spouse. I have to say,
great.
The Wu of the Figueroa Wu Family Foundation is the person who does my laundry, who gives me dinner every day, who does the grocery shopping most of the time, who changes the litter box since the cat
Crucial.
Makes me really happy, but I actually don't take care of the cats. So I have a partner who really likes being the domestic parent, and that has been really good. We both work full time as physicians, but while I'm doing the executive stuff for the organization, the budgets, the grant writing, etc., he does the parent work in the house, which is great of him. But it's so something beautiful. He likes. So we both try to just play to our strengths. Those are things we like doing. He doesn't want to do the taxes for our family. So it's worked out that he's married a person who doesn't like it either, but is willing to do it. Who will be the general contractor when we do renovations and pick the furniture and just that type of stuff. We both like gardening, and we both like decorating for the holidays. So we do that stuff together. But
what a power team you are.
Yeah. When I was training director for the family medicine residents, I've had a lot of leadership roles at the university. I used to have the residents do a burnout survey in February every year. The one that a lot of us use is the Maslock burnout survey. And it measures 3 components. It measures exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and sense of self-efficacy. Because people interchange burnout with exhaustion.
Yes. Right. Sometimes you just need a nap or a vacation.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, but for me, burnout is a little more broad than that, because I've always used that definition. So when the residents are saying to me, I was on hospital service last week, they say I'm burnt out. I say, are you emotionally exhausted? Are you depersonalizing? Like, which part of it are you feeling right now, so that I can make sure it's safe for you to work? So I think I'm exhausted a lot of the time.
Right.
I don't like waking up every morning. I can tell you that. I'm doing that almost every day, unless I'm so nervous and I have to. Like, we were moving a migrant family on Monday, and I couldn't sleep the night before. I was so nervous about moving them. So I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, even though I'd gone to bed after 1, and I was very disappointed with myself, but there was nothing to do about it. But the part about the depersonalization, I don't think I still see people as, in independent creatures with their own needs. And I think I can connect to that humanity. And then the self-efficacy, I have that. I know that what I'm doing makes a difference. I'm really, really grateful that I am not so transactional at the Pilsen Food Pantry anymore. I was really worried that if something happened to me, if I got sick, the pantry wouldn't go on without me.
Of course, right.
And I'm so grateful to the staff that work there. Their mission is the same as my mission. We are so aligned. So if something happened to me, I'm not worried that the Pilsen Food Pantry won't go on. In fact, the organization is 6.5 years old. And if something happened to me, they'd be okay.
That's so impressive. Very few nonprofit leaders get to that place ever.
Last year, we fed and clothed over 40,000 visitors.
Wow.
We can't, and the pantry visitors was around 28,000, I believe. And the average household has 3.1 people.
Wow.
So 80,000 people we fed, and 12,000 people we clothed. And then we helped with shelters and all these other things. So, we impacted over 100,000 people with over $3 million of supplies. So it's
unbelievable.
It's really great that it's gotten to this point. And, I don't do this by myself. I mentioned my husband. I mentioned my staff. If this is not the Evelyn Figueroa show, I'm the face of, a lot of the media talk for our organization. And I'm kind of the horse that's pushing that cart hard. But I am not alone. I'm listening. I'm always learning. And I'm not standing by myself.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That is just incredible. You're just the most beautiful person, most beautiful spirit. I've enjoyed every minute of this conversation. I feel like I could keep chatting for hours, but you've got a lot to do. So I just want to finish our time together by asking for everyone listening out there who is so moved by your work and the things that you've said today, how can we be supportive? How can we be connected to your work or connected to helping and supporting and receiving food and services when we need? How can we all be involved?
I think us remembering that any of this can happen to any of us. Mm-hmm. There are people that did not expect to be unhoused 4 months ago in different parts of the world right now that are living hand to mouth. The amount of fighting that occurs in the world can take someone who, like me, who's very, very stable and render me into a horrible situation in the blink of an eye. Because it's not just social determinants of health, it's political determinants of health. And we have to remember that. We have to remember that humanity and that we're all here, we're all in this together. And the more that we protect the people and advocate for the people that are the most vulnerable, the safer we all are. There's rent relief that happens frequently. And I was talking to someone about, well, who pays for that rent relief? And they're like, oh, it comes from the city budget. And I was like, oh, that's right. So then that really comes from taxes. So everything, the money has to come from somewhere. So we can either do it proactively or we can be reactive, just like I talked about the migrant stuff. We're going to pay for this. Healthcare can either be proactive or reactive. And I think we need to really shift how we think about how we're investing money and how we're thinking for the future and planning and sustaining complex human needs. So for people that want to get involved, I always encourage people to find a cause that they care about a lot. If food insecurity is not your jam and environmental justice is, then you should go over to that. If disability advocacy is what really gives you energy, then work on that. Find something that you care about. Find an organization that shares your values and start volunteering with that organization. Yes. Because every organization needs more support. My board members help me so much. I can't do the stuff I do without the board. The other thing is for people that can't afford, cash is always king.
Yes.
But the cash doesn't have to be your cash. It can be someone you know that has money. Because a lot of people would rather donate than volunteer. Right. So I always tell my students, I don't want a penny from you. And if I see a donation that's from a student, I stop them and say, no, thank you. I don't want it. Go get your nails done. Go do something nice for yourself. It's really okay. Like there are other people who can pay for this. And what I mean by that is that Chicago, depending on the year, is the 8th to 10th richest city in the world. We have the money to solve all these problems. Again, it really boils down to if these are problems we want to solve.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. This has just been the most wonderful conversation. I'm grateful for all you do for the city and all you do for the world. And I just hope all the blessings and goodness and sunshine come at you today and the rest of this year. Dr. Evelyn, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks. Have a great day.